So it exacerbates all of these issues right down here. Variation from best known science. I thought David Eddings' comment was just brilliant when he said that the complexity of modern medicine has exceeded the capacity of the unaided human mind. He said, we just can't know as human beings all the treatments, all the things that are effective, and there's no way we can stay up with our professional journals to learn that. Even if you read, I think it was an article or 2 articles a night, every night, all year long, you'd be about, I think it's 100 years behind by the end of the year at the rate of which we're producing new information out of research. It's tremendous. So we don't have a capacity anymore for keeping it in our heads. We're going to have to rely on technology more and more. And this is a kind of an idea that we're beginning to see. I'm working on a board of directors, a National eHealth Collaborative, and our goal for the eHealth Collaborative is to begin to connect these community health information exchanges across the nation. And those things now we want to be able to transfer a patient's record, whether they've been down in Phoenix this week or Tucson this week to visit family and something happens to them down here. And they have an acute episode down here. Information can travel with that patient via their permission. Now, why it's critical, this came from Dennis Morrison. I was doing one of these presentations, and I can't remember the audience. I do remember that it was in one of those lovely settings, and the waves were crashing outside, and I was very miffed that that was happening. But David Morrison, Dennis came up to me afterwards, and he was the one who said, boy, you've just got a huge gap here. You're not even considering behavioral health in the work that you're doing. He said, and I think it's going to come back to haunt you in a big way. So I went back, took a look at what we were doing, and that's when we began to incorporate. But Dennis's points here were, you can't look at traditional EMRs and try to apply that to the kind of care that we deliver. It doesn't work. And it doesn't work because of all of these. These text and narrative notes are essential. They're not one of those sort of nice to haves. If you can tack that PDF on, that's a great thing. He said, for us, that's the essence of what we're trying to communicate, is the information in that text. Continuity of care, extremely important. Group home, apartments, along that notion of seamless care is even more critical, he said, for behavioral and mental health, he said, than it ever is in your setting. And then greater use of groups in provision of treatment and therapies, different capabilities of electronic health records, and the time frames are very different. Time frames are very different. So we have to have specialized systems, but they've got to connect up to the bigger system as well. So it presented a real challenge. Talk to us about the availability and the timeliness and the integration of disparate pieces of information to come together for you. You've got to pull it in from a variety of different places to be able to support your decisions. So more than ever, you need something that can integrate information for you. And the timely and reviewing and signing of treatment plans is very, very critical for you. It's the equivalent of the CPOE. And assessment tools key to diagnosis. And then privacy and security are paramount. In Rhode Island, when we got our little $5 million grant from the federal government to begin our health information exchange, we were all excited and got our congratulatory letter, and the next letter we got was from the ACLU. And they said, you're going to do what? So you're going to put everybody's sensitive information out on the internet. Oh yeah, all their mental health history and their HIV, maybe not. And so the first thing that we did was put the ACLU on our committee. And then we began to put other people involved in behavioral health on our committee. We put people on the Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And I'll never forget Deb DeBear one day. We were in a meeting, and Deb said, you know, you people just don't get it. She said, you really don't get it. She said, I see your list of sensitive information up there, and yeah, it's the mental health information and it's the HIV information. But I can tell you, if a woman's got an abuser who's broken her ribs the night before, and she goes in for treatment that next day, and that abuser finds out that she's been in for treatment and she's talked to somebody about those broken ribs, that's her sensitive information, so you just don't get it. We promptly put Deb DeBear on our committee. We also put one of the most outspoken patient advocates in Rhode Island. I mean, she struck fear in the heart of every corporate CEO in the state. I love her. Marty Rosenberg is her name. And I remember floating her name to a couple of other board members, and they said, oh, we want consumer involvement. Just not that one. Go get a different one. Because Marty was on the nightly news. When she stormed the State House, something happened. And I said, no, I want Marty Rosenberg because I want somebody to hold our feet to the fire till they blister on these issues of privacy and security, or patients and families and consumers will not trust this system, and they shouldn't unless we pay foremost attention to that. So we put Marty Rosenberg on there, and she turned our world upside down. I mean, we had to change the technology system. We had to change the consent system. We had to pass a law in the state of Rhode Island before they would let things move ahead, and was the right thing to do. That law says it's voluntary, folks. Nobody can be forced to put their information in this health information exchange unless they say so. Secondly, nobody can ever be refused treatment if they say no. Thirdly, people need to get a record of who's been looking at their records, because that's new. We talk about privacy and security threats from health information technology. Well, there are some privacy and security gains when you can look electronically at a record. Some of you know that Nix Mary Jones, an 18-month-old child, 7 years old rather, was beaten to death in the state of New York and horribly sexually and physically abused in the course of her death. And when she was admitted to a New York hospital, there were 34 people that decided to peek into Nix Mary's records with absolutely no reason to do so. Now, the hospital could discipline and or fire all of them because they had an electronic footprint there. They had an electronic medical record. They knew who should be looking at her record and who shouldn't. Now, in this day and age, with our paper-based system, short of dusting for fingerprints, we're not going to find out who's been plowing through whose record. And so there's an ability now through our law in the state of Rhode Island for people to say, give me a record, I want to know. So that woman who's being abused, if she's worried that that abuser is going to be looking into her records, she can go in every night if she wants and check to see who's looked at her records that day. She has a control like she's never had before over that kind of information, or she can choose to say no. The other thing that we did for people said, you know, you've got to give people the ability to block their mental health information. Now, you may disagree with me on this, but I'm tired of that stigma. I am tired of that information being looked upon as if it is to be hidden, if it is to be something to be, but I understand how society reacts to it. So we certainly have to protect it. But one of the things we did not give into in our health information exchange is we did not permit the idea that people can block some information and let the other information flow. Because what that would do, I want to block that lab test, I want to block that medication, but I want only this information to flow. Oh, heck, that's the information system we have today. It's loaded with holes. Any practitioner goes in there, they've got an incomplete data set to try to make decisions on. So our compromise was for people to say, all right, if you're in, you're in. So all your information's in there. Mental health information, HIV, all of it's in there. But you have complete and total control over who sees it. So you can say, I want emergency only. I better be gasping for breath on that floor and in a coma before somebody breaks the glass on that and looks at it. Or you can say, you know, I think I want everybody involved in my care. My mom's got 16 different doctors. She wants everybody in her care as well. Or you can say, look, I'm just going to let that physician and that hospital, and that's it. The guy who's going to take the wart off of me next week doesn't get to see my record. The person who's going to be taking care of my tooth extraction, not going to see my record. Now, they would argue that they need to see your record, but it's your choice. So in the state of Rhode Island, we gave tremendous control, and it had to do with your participation. That wouldn't have happened. You know what we would have done? We would have built a system and then tried to get people to join it, tried to convince them of the safety of it when it wasn't really there. But you made sure that it was really there. And for that was a life-changing thing for me in the terms of the development of this. So let's take a look at the action at the federal and state level and why your leadership is critical to continue, because it's been so important to us. Oh, great, excellent. For the first time, we've gotten real money behind it. President Obama has made it very, very clear that he too sees health information technology as the foundation for the transformation. The other thing about it is if you start to introduce this, yes, I applaud him too. You introduce this into your communities, it's not only the foundation for the reform of healthcare. People have to work together and talk to each other if they're going to transfer information. This is the Trojan horse for the transformation, because it gets people together that couldn't stand to breathe the same air. People who are on other proprietary sides of things to come into the room, ostensibly just because we're going to work on this tech junk. And it's interesting how the conversation bleeds over from the tech junk into the other things that are really critical for care in this community and what people can expect and what we should conscionably deliver here in this community. So good news is there's real money now. It's not all good news for you. So what we found is that misaligned incentives are driving the lack of capital for us. This was the thing when I talked about the really toxic payment system that we have. We found here that when a physician puts in one of these electronic medical records, computer-based physician order entry, they go through all the time to pick out the vendor, to pay for it, to train their staff, to go through the downtime that it takes to get the darn thing installed. That practitioner gets about 11% of that return on investment.